joined by another incredible guest, neuroscientist of good and Parkinson's disease, Victor Pando-Naude. How are you, sir? You okay?
I'm very good. Thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
It's my absolute pleasure. How's things been? You been okay?
Yes, all good. All good in this side.
Oh, I'm glad to hear. I mean, something I love to ask all my guests actually is how they've been over the last couple of years. So for you, how have you been these last couple of years? You been okay?
Yeah, it's been difficult because I have a family, right?
Mm.
And then I have a PhD to finish. So last year was very challenging because I had to make time to work, time for the homeschool and stuff. Uh, I was getting some new data
Mm.
when the first lockdown happened. So I had to stop my research. Fortunately, I was able to get that data afterwards, and I was able to change a little bit the framing of the dissertation with some other studies I was working during the lockdowns, mainly system reviews, that kind of sort of qualitative research, and and I was able to finish.
Oh, so glad to hear.
Yes, so now it's a relief, but it's momentarily because the next thing already
Yeah.
here. So yeah,
I can imagine. I mean, were you given extra
yeah,
time because of the lockdowns, or were you like literally just like going straight away?
yeah. No, I mean there was a possibility, but I fortunately I was very busy, so I had
Mm.
other stuff working, and I was able to just put things together,
Hmm.
and it worked. So I didn't need for more time.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
good. I mean, how did you balance obviously work like living with your family, helping with homeschool, plus doing your PhD and working? How did you juggle so many important things at the same time?
Yeah. Well, here in Denmark, the PhD is work. Actually,
Yeah.
it's like two full-time jobs,
Yeah, I
right?
can imagine.
So of course, my wife also works. So it's a matter of coordination and staying motivated. I love what I do. I love coming to my office and work. I didn't love that much working at home.
Yeah.
But now we are here in Denmark. Now we are everything is as before. Let's
Yeah.
say
Oh,
so.
so glad to
So
hear.
now it's I'm glad to be back at the office. I will cherish those times with my family, but I'm glad it's over for now. Yes.
Good. I'm glad to hear.
Yeah.
I mean, is your office space far from where you live at the moment? Is it quite a close journey for you?
Yeah, I live Aarhus. It's the name of the city in Denmark. It's the second biggest city in Denmark, and it is a small town. I mean,
Mm.
me coming from Mexico City, this is a little
Yeah.
town, so
Yeah.
everything is close by.
Oh, I'm so glad to
Yeah,
hear that. I mean,
yeah.
obviously, you work as a neuroscientist of grief and Parkinson's disease, and you also work in music too. I mean, what drew you to that
Mhm.
world originally? Have you always been interested in the world of medicine and so forth, or did you get into it later on in life?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough that my parents, taught me some music, and I had private lessons of piano.
Hmm.
So I love music, and then I started medicine school, and also I continued with piano. So I had two majors, but of course it took me a little longer to finish medicine. But then
Yeah.
I was done with medicine, and then I started to work as a clinician, right?
Hmm.
Uh, but I always had this sense of I want to know what happens in the brain and the music and some clinical applications. So I applied for a master's, and I was lucky to get in, and my supervisor was very nice. And then I started to work on music for chronic pain and doing this magnetic resonance imaging so
Hmm.
that we can measure the function of the brain. And then I landed here, which is the Center for Music in the Brain, which is the biggest center of this kind of neuroscience of music. And yes, and so I have actually my dream job. I always wanted to do this. So yes, that's how I came here.
Yeah. It's so good to hear, because I know are you a postdoctoral researcher at the moment? Is that your position?
Now I'm a postdoc. Yeah. So it's a new
Yeah.
position. It's based on projects, but yeah, I was lucky enough to continue the work I did in my PhD and still develop it.
Yeah.
And if I may, I explain you a little bit what I do, which is so we are interested in how the brain, how we perceive groove in music, which is this pleasurable desire to move to the beat, right? And how is it that the brain does it? It's very interesting how our brain collects information from the environment and integrates that information with previous knowledge or associations, predictions. Okay, so in order to study this integration of what we call bottom up and top down, how the brain is integrating this information, music is very helpful because it is a complex stimulus, and then so, for example, we can study how is it that from the moment we start to listen to a nice beat that we like, then we start automatically moving our body, tapping to the rhythm, dancing, whatever, right? So this is what we call groove, a pleasurable desire to move. Okay, and so we have found through studies and MRI that there's an inverted U-shape relationship. Okay, so as we increase the complexity of rhythms, okay, our ability to predict what happens next diminishes. Okay, because, for example, an isochronous rhythm, boom, 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 has zero complexity because we can predict exactly the next one. Okay, so it's boring.
Yeah.
On the other side, if we have a very complex rhythm, our brain cannot create a model of what we are perceiving a long time. So it will sound something like dun 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 dun, and then we cannot dance to that. But there's a middle part, a sweet spot, that allows for some violations of the expectation. Okay, and then our brain kind of wants to fill in, and that's when we start to move, and it's something like ten 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 ten. Okay, so there's a violation of our expectations of the prediction. Our brain wants to fill it in, and then we start to move, and then we feel pleasure. Okay?
Yeah.
So these mechanisms through MRI, we've seen that there are special areas in the brain that are more active when the rhythm is groovy than when it's not groovy. Okay, and such areas include the basal ganglia. Okay, these areas of the basal ganglia are dysfunctional in Parkinson's disease patients. Okay, so this is a very privileged position because we can build a bridge between basic research, which is what are the mechanisms, how is music and groove expressed in the brain, and build into clinical applications. So the effects, how is groovy music affect Parkinson's disease patients? So one hypothesis can be that the experience of groove depends on the normal function of these basal ganglia, because we compare healthy adults with Parkinson's patients, and they behave differently. So we can speculate and say, okay, the basal ganglia are very important for that, right? On the other side of the bridge is the clinical applications. We know that there's this method called rhythmic auditory stimulation, which is based on a metronome. If you cue the patients with a metronome and you increase a little bit the tempo, then features in their gait will improve, like the stride length, the cadence, the speed, they improve, okay? But this effect is very small. We don't know exactly. So some patients respond and some do not. It seems to be related to the progression of the disease and how well they have these timing abilities. But now what I want to do is what happens when we increase a little bit the complexity of the rhythm. Instead of just a metronome, we increase the complexity, so then we try to evoke some other responses in the brain, like pleasure. And of course, the pleasure and the reward network also runs through the basal ganglia. It's just another part of the basal ganglia. One is ventral and one is dorsal. So it is a motor and the reward system. So that's mainly what I'm trying to study, this interaction.
That's amazing. Because one of the questions I got so many questions to ask you. I'm getting over with the questions I want to ask you, but I know I know that obviously, from what I understand, that music involves the whole brain. And when it comes to listening to music, as opposed to me playing an instrument, which we'll get to separately in a minute, when say listening to music, do certain parts of the brain being used more than others? Say you mentioned basal ganglia there. When you listen to music, are parts like amygdala or cerebellum getting used more than, say, the prefrontal cortex or cerebrum, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So actually, I just published a paper in Nature in Scientific Reports last year, in which a meta-analysis is an analysis of published studies that they are already there, right? So I took studies of MRI and music. So participants inside the MRI scanner listening to music or playing music with a special keyboard, or imagining music. Okay, so you can measure those things in the brain. And there's a special statistical analysis which you take. So try to think of the brain as a map, and you have coordinates, right? So you say, okay, the amygdala is active in this paradigm, and then you say the coordinates X, Y, Z, okay? And then you publish that in your brain. What I do with the meta-analysis is I take those coordinates and I put it in the software, and it does this called activation likelihood estimation, and it kind of groups all the published studies together to see which areas are consistent. Okay, so this study included 130 studies of music cognition overall, which includes perception, production, and imagery. And we found differences and areas that are equally activated in the three of them. For example, the premotor cortex, okay, which is right in the middle, is active in all three. Okay, when we compare perception, just listening, to production, there are still areas, motor and auditory areas in both, but of course there are more areas, more extended areas when we are producing a movement, of course, right? The cerebellum is also more active. There are different areas that are more active while producing. And in the imagery, there's a specific area for that in the parietal lobe that it's very active when we are doing nothing, when we are like tripping, thinking about whatever random things. Okay, so of course my results confirm everything that's published over the last 30 years, and then we can see which areas are different, and then the framing of the paper runs around the predictive coding theory, how we integrate bottom-up information with top-down. So you can say that perception is both bottom-up, top-down, and production is also bottom-up. You're doing, but you're listening to yourself, while imagery is more a top-down. You are not actually listening to anything, but it's almost like you can hear. So there's also activity in secondary auditory areas while you are imagining music. So you are activate the auditory areas even though you are not hearing anything. Okay?
Got it. I mean, I know some of my questions might be silly, but I'm so fascinated by the whole brain, like you said, with music. And like I said, I got so many questions to ask you. I mean, when it comes to focusing on, say, playing an instrument, for instance, do certain instruments use the brain more than, say, others? Say, for instance, you're playing piano, which obviously uses both hands at the same time, as opposed to maybe playing the piccolo or the guitar or a trumpet, because obviously some instruments I feel are more difficult than others. Obviously, all are very difficult in their own right. Do certain instruments use the brain more than others in your research so far?
It's kind of a tricky question, because it is difficult to compare them because exactly the things you are saying.
Yeah.
For example, the piano, you are pressing a key.
Yeah.
While the violin, you're actually creating the sound, right? So in terms of sensory motor abilities, there may be differences. And as you know, in the motor cortex that run like this, we have representations of different parts of the body. It's called the homunculus. And of course, there may be differences in the activity, for example, of the lips of a trumpist. Of course, the area must be bigger than a pianist, for example, which is more the fingers. Okay, so yeah, there are several studies that have already tested this, but it is tricky because it is difficult to compare. There are also, I can talk about some of the other studies we've been doing about musical expertise and how playing an instrument changes the structure of your brain, what we call neuroplasticity. Okay, and it seems that there's also there's like a threshold in the age. So if you start like at 7 years old or before, you are more likely to find these differences in the structure, both in the gray matter, which is the neurons, but also in the white matter, which are the connections. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So I will think that this kind of difference in the instrument will activate similar areas, but maybe in a slightly different manner, of course.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you spoke about young ages, between 7, maybe even before that as well. I mean, have you ever done any research or work when it comes to prodigies in music? I mean, because we know that from experience, we've seen young kids as young as 4 or 5 sometimes playing an instrument at a level of someone who's much older. I mean, have you come across any prodigies yourself or researched any kids that might be incredible at what they do at such a young age?
Well, I haven't personally. I haven't worked on that, but I've read some about that, and it is the whole discussion about nature and nurture. Okay, so there are some biological aspects that will make you more likely to be talented in some areas, but it's also the exposure to the environment, right? So these prodigies, they have the wiring, let's say, for that, and it comes almost as logical as, it's like, why don't you see that, right? Because they just feel it. It's very interesting, of course, and this may extrapolate to also other areas like math and sports.
Of course. Oh, okay, because that answered the question I had in my mind just now, actually, where I've heard 2 different things about this, where you're either gifted with, whether it's music or math, like you said, or something else, and then I've heard some other people saying you're not born gifted, but you have to work towards it. I mean, is everyone gifted at something, whether it's music or maths or science or anything else, or is it something that you have to work at to be better?
Yes, it is. I would say it is the same. I would say that you can learn anything you want if you put your mind on it. Anyone can learn whatever we want. We have the same areas in the brain.
Yeah,
everyone can learn everything. Of course, some will have much more trouble, and some will do it easily. Or if you start in a later age, it will be more difficult than when we are kids, that we just absorb everything and don't even notice, right?
Of course.
So these are the sensitive times that in order to have these neuroplastic effects is, for example, in terms of age, you're young, you're making new connections. So it's more easy to learn. But but I mean, if you want, you put your mind on it, anyone can do anything.
Of course. I mean, I've obviously come across neuroplasticity a lot, actually. And like you said, when you're a kid, you learn things easier, but when you get older, it gets harder. I mean, for you, when does it reach peak neuroplasticity in terms of age? Was it like, say, the teenage years or early 20s, where the brain is still learning things quickly, or maybe younger than that? Is there like a peak age in terms of
Yeah,
neuroplasticity?
well, there are more complex systems within it. So, for example, when we are in the womb, we are producing neurons, a lot of neurons. Okay. Then throughout our child years and teenage, then we develop a little bit more connections, and then at the end of the teenage years, but a little bit more longer, 2022, we at the same time, it's not like one starts and the another one finishes and the other one starts. These are complex systems. But at that later age, then we have what is called pruning. So we actually get rid of things that we don't use. Okay, that's another sensitive time, right?
Okay.
We are making wrong decisions, being reckless, things like that, that can actually translate to that. But but if it depends on your health, on your environment, a lot of things. But I think these two times are the sensitive, when you are connecting things, and then when you are getting rid of things that you don't need.
Okay, got it. I got it. And would you say or suggest that there's a limit to how much you do any kind of activity, whether it's listening to music or playing it or creating it, to get the most out of it? Or does it really depend on the person as well? You can do it for as long as you want to.
I also have that data in my meta-analysis, in which I include years of musical practice, for example, years of the onset, at what age they started, and time per hours. I think I have hours per week practicing or listening or having it in the background, not paying attention to it, but having it. And of course that plays a role, but the problem is that not every paper puts that information, right? So that's something that meta-analysis also are good, because you recommend things. So I put it there. You should put more data, because as a musician, if I haven't been practicing that much, so things get lost. Okay, so probably if you measure my musical abilities right now, you measure things. But if I get to practice 2 weeks, then I'm probably going to be better at that, because I already knew it. So it also depends on the current time of practice, right?
Okay.
So it's maybe, and it's all in there. And they say the piano. I play piano. It's kind of treasonous, because if you stop, then you forget, and it's very frustrating. But it's in there. So if you start practicing, it comes again. It's not like you start from scratch. But it is very important to be aware that for some it will be more time during the week, for some less, but at least something that is constant.
Of course. And then on the same sort of basis as that, then too much of anything usually is quite a bad thing. I mean, in terms of, say, over practice or over listening or over creating or composing, I know there's physical problems that happen. Like I've heard about people getting sort of injuries in their hands or their lips, whatever it might be. But in terms of the brain, does it affect the brain in any way? Say if you overdo something with music in any way?
It has to do with not much more. I mean, anything you do too much, maybe bad, right? That's that. I mean, but at the same, if that doing too much is getting better at something, and it's motivating, and as long as it doesn't interfere with your other activities like your sleep and eating, you can work as hard as you want. I mean, it's good for you. But of course, in terms of practicing too much, it's more in the sensory motor system. So as you said, it's called dystonia. So some will have cramps, or the hand will stop working, right? And and they say it's my mind, something. It is the mind. So it is the mind, and the motor system, and a lot of things. And Professor Eckhart Altenmuller is a specialist in that sort of research. And, and it's very funny how there's one paper in which they try to distract them from that. So, for example, they put a wristband that vibrates, something like that, and then they improve. Or they're like a dual task. They do something else and they get better. So yes, it has something to do with the brain, but it also depends on how well balanced your life is. If you're just working and leaving everything to the trash, well,
got it. I've got it. I mean, what are your thoughts on absolute pitch or perfect pitch, and how and why do you feel certain people have this? And also, adding to that as well, like you mentioned earlier, is this something that anyone can practice and get to as well, or is this something only a few people can have, really?
Yes, we have also some studies in the center about that. They actually, an area in the auditory cortex is bigger in absolute pitch possessors. And this is very interesting because there's the organization that goes from the ear to the auditory cortex is tonotopic. Okay, so this means that inside the ear we have the snail, right? If you unfold the snail, it's like a piano. It goes from thin to not thin. And it represents the frequencies. Okay, and depending where the sound comes, in which frequency, it will excite this part or this part. Okay, and if it excites this part, it opens channels to the neurons that then project to the cortex. But in the cortex, there's the same organization. Okay, it's also like the same. If you are stimulated in this frequency band, then you will see the activity in that area that represents that frequency band. Okay, so some people have the right wiring to tell exactly, the sound of the door, and it's A minor, and you're like, okay, how is that possible? But it is because they have this special wiring. And I think there's a paper on how you can lose it, actually.
Really?
But I don't know. I'm very. I haven't heard of anyone that developed it.
Okay.
Right. So if you have absolute pitch, you have absolute pitch.
Yeah, I got it.
Yes,
I got it.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of sticking to absolute pitch as well. I've heard people actually getting sometimes annoyed by having it because, like you said, like the door was slamming. They say, "Oh, that's A minor," or a little chime of glass, that's B. Is that actually true? Is that true?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I haven't experienced, but maybe it's annoying.
Yeah.
But I mean, in terms of musical abilities, it's it's an ability that will help you if you want to be a composer or something like that, and or an orchestra director. Well, that's perfect, because then exactly, like if you're telling someone words and you understand me, it's the same with music.
Yeah, of course. And kind of sticking on the brain as well, obviously. We've seen videos, or I've seen videos especially, of stroke victims or dementia patients or people with serious brain injuries literally losing their whole livelihood through the injuries they've had. Yet when it comes to listening to music, they recite every word or remember the songs, the tune, which I find incredible, because for me, dementia and Alzheimer's especially is one that's probably is the saddest illness I've come across. Remember losing your whole life, but yet when it comes to listening to music, you can remember everything. I mean, what is happening in the brain when this happens? Do certain sections of the brain kind of keep that memory locked in there and not get damaged, or what's happening exactly? So these victims can still remember music after injury.
So in the case of Alzheimer, it seems that the musical abilities are preserved. So it is always important to specify which pathology, which disease, right? Because they have different things in the brain. But for example, stroke is something very localized, right? And it's mainly in the front or in the middle. So they may have trouble speaking or remember things. But there are others like Alzheimer, which is a type of dementia, right? We forget things, cognitive abilities start to deteriorate. We have others like Parkinson's, which is more a motor disease, but in the late stages, there's also that dementia. And it has to do a little bit overall of how these musical memories are acquired in the brain, right? So when we practice or when we do something, these connections, we repeat them, they become stronger, right? Stronger. And then when we go to sleep, our memories then are consolidated in another area, okay? So this area where memories are consolidated, it is also segmented or segregated within itself. So there are several functions that will be preserved, several that will be not, right? And for example, it has seen that sleep habits are very important to not getting dementia, because then you allow your memories to stick, to save them in the hard drive, right? And since music is a very pleasurable thing to do for us humans, and we often listen to our favorite music over and over and over again, that may lead to some theories about why in late stages of dementia there's still some memory of music, because also music is very related to emotions, right? So you know that sometimes you hear a song and it completely transports you to a moment or a kiss or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so when this learning is associated with pleasure, then it's more consolidated, in our brain.
Yeah, because you asked my next question now, actually. Because I listened to a sleep expert called Matthew Walker, I think his name was. And he mentions that when you do, he obviously mentions, like you just said, the importance of sleep, how incredibly important it is, and it's consolidating memory and so forth while you sleep. Is it true that when you're sleeping, that the day's activities, say, are being moved around at 20 times the speed of how you did it during the day or something? Is that correct? Or 30 times faster?
You mean the dreams?
The dreams, or when you're actually...
Dreams.
Say you practice, say, a section of music for, say, 3 or 4 hours, you can't get it, but then the next day, after you slept on it, it's worked it out again 20 times faster or something along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, it is a whole universe, that of the dreams, right? Yeah. But it seems that, and there are different stages of sleep, right? And there's one called the REM, where it seems that it's when we are consolidated and we have movement of our eyes.
Movement, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it is very difficult because it's very subjective. We cannot, wake them up and tell, what were you dreaming? It's very difficult.
Yeah.
But it seems that this kind of, you kind of repeat our dreams. You repeat it a lot of time, and you think it was only one time, but you actually repeat it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's fascinating. I don't know much about that. I know only about music for example, for insomnia, that it works. But yeah, I don't know about how fast we plan. Another thing, which is very useful for musicians, is to mentally recreate the movements, for example. But when you do too much, and we go back to the overdoing things, you can end up dreaming about it, and sometimes it is not that pleasurable, right?
Yeah, of course.
You start what we call to ruminate. You start thinking about the same thing, and it's very annoying.
Yeah. That's actually, you actually got a really interesting question. Actually, you mentioned music and insomnia, which a lot of people have. I sometimes have it as well myself. I mean, for yourself, what would you recommend in terms of music to help people with insomnia? Do you recommend, say, very relaxing, slow, soothing music, or playing something else. What would you recommend for those who might be suffering quite badly or very badly with insomnia to help them sleep better?
Again, it depends on the disease, what type of insomnia it is, right? Is it because you're stressed? Is it because you are not eating? Is it because you don't know why, right?
Yeah.
But overall, the theory is that of hyper arousal. So your brain is very excited, and it doesn't let you alone, right? So the type of music that, we did a study in Spotify to see the patterns, what people are listening different times of the day, and in the night there were a lot of classical, but there was also like K-pop, something like that. So it is very variable, and in terms of insomnia or pain, for example, the preference is very important. It's what you like, right? And slow tempo helps. Something, for example, for pain, if we talk about pain, we want to distract from the pain. So you want something that catches your attention, okay? So it has to be self-chosen, familiar, pleasurable, and slow tempo, right? But if you use those characteristics for insomnia, then you're paying a lot of attention. And what we want is the brain to stop paying attention and go to sleep, right? So maybe non-familiar music is more effective so that it doesn't catch your attention that much. And of course, it has to be soothing, and slow tempo also works. In terms of Parkinson's, for example, you need something that is more upbeat, like a march or a valse, something that makes them want to move. So the characteristics of the music will depend on the effect that you want, will depend on exactly the population that you are interested in. In the case specific of insomnia, you want to stop the arousal, so something soothing. And it's hard because preference plays a lot what you like. So for chronic pain, what you like, go ahead. For insomnia, maybe something that you don't know. And soothing.
Love that. Got it. I'll keep that in mind for definite then, for sure. Thank you for that. But this might be a controversial question, but it's quite fascinating on my behalf. I mean, we've heard talk about sleep and pain and so forth. We've heard a lot of stories about a lot of artists smoking weed or cannabis to help them unlock creativity in some sort of format. I mean, what are your thoughts on people smoking it to unlock the creativity? And if so, has there been any studies on this as well, if it's actually true?
We also have some studies in the center. Right now, not about cannabis, but we have one with psilocybin, which is in mushrooms, and LSD. And basically, we did a functional connectivity analysis of the brain, right? With the drug, without the drug, right? And we see that when you are under the influence of a psychedelic, you have more connections, more chaotic connections, and then through this computational analysis, you can detect states like in networks, right? Like a state of now I'm thinking about math, now I'm thinking about this thing, and now I'm thinking about what I'm going to eat. So there's this dynamic coupling all the time, okay? And you can measure connectivity between areas. So there's a difference between being without the drug, with the drug. There's more chaotic connectivity, but then music kind of guides this disruption in a more, let's say, organized way again, okay? So yeah, it's very interesting about how we can measure how the brain works in altered states of consciousness. In terms of creativity, well, I think this sort of recruitment of different areas while being high may improve your creativeness, but in that moment, right? In that moment, and maybe you are thinking that, wow, this is very creative. Then you listen it afterwards, maybe it's not that cool.
Maybe not.
Right? So it also depends on who is evaluating creativity, right? But yes, I mean, there's research on that now in the center of how music can guide altered states of consciousness, and if it works for practicing, for focusing, for
Got it.
Not much as an intervention, but to study the mechanisms of music in the brain.
Okay, and that's really interesting, and kind of sticking on the basis of creativity as well. Actually, have you done any kind of studies or research between humans and different kinds of animals, and if there's any similarities in the brain and creativity when it comes to listening to music at all? Maybe like it's quite similar to of birds and humans, or monkeys and humans and so forth.
Actually, we have a new associate professor. He works with seals and how they communicate. And of course, this translational science from animal to human is very interesting, but super tricky. But there are some things that you can see in both in several species, right? And that can tell us a story about the evolution of music, right? It's very interesting. Why do we make music? How did it started? The cultural evolution of music. So it seems that there are primitive areas of the brain that have to do with timing and sequencing that are shared with birds, for example, that they sing and they repeat it, and then that's how they communicate. It seems that we also started to do music for the same reasons, to communicate, to say something, right? So it's very interesting.
It really is. And I know that in one of your papers as well that you published about, can eating make us more creative? And in your work so far, have you come across any kinds of food or drink that has a kind of altering effect in the brain and creativity, such as coffee, or a high protein diet, or fish diet, high carbs, high or low fat, anything like that in terms of your research?
It depends. It depends on how you practice, and as a medical doctor, I will always say, the best thing is eat well and exercise, and that's and then you will be fine. That will help you in all the other aspects of your life. But I will think that when you practice, you have to be motivated, right? You have to like it. So I think in terms of the food, maybe something about the dopaminergic system that you like and helps you be happy when you're practicing. That's something that I will speculate, but I haven't seen that in detail.
Yeah, okay, got it. And this is another weird question of mine, but I want to find this out actually, because I know you got to go, so I won't keep you for too much longer. But I've realized that my brain feels hungry for knowledge. Is that just me being strange or weird, or is that quite a regular thing in people where they kind of, their brain feels hungry for something, whether it's knowledge or something else? It's me being weird.
I mean, I think we were born with that.
Yeah.
And we are weird when we are kids. Kids are the scientists. They are pure scientists. They are very curious.
Yeah.
They are following the scientific method, which is observation. You make a hypothesis, you do an experiment, and then you report your results. And a kid is doing that all the time through curiosity and learning. And sometimes society actually suppresses this curiosity, and you have to be like this and this and this, and So I think that it's something that the brain wants. The brain wants to feel it, right?
Yeah.
But it also depends on our will to do it, because we can spend 3 hours on Twitter, right? And really learn some things. Twitter is very is big in my field, and then you can learn about, new papers. People are talking about this paper, whatever. So you are connected. You build your network, right? But you can spend whatever time just doing nothing, and it can be rewarding, right?
Yeah.
Also, so and you're not really learning something or getting new knowledge about something, right?
Yeah.
So I think it also depends on having a focus on something that you want to learn and go for it. And we have now all the tools and internet. You can learn anything in the internet. So
yeah. Of course. I mean, talk about learning actually. When it comes to learning an instrument, for instance, is it very similar in a way to learning a different language or similar to something else that you learn?
So the process of learning, at its core, it's the same for anything, anything new, for anything that your brain receives and then makes a model of what it just perceived, and then you learn. So in terms of learning, it's all about repetition and reward, right? So that's how it works. And let's say the basic measurement or the basic unit, it's mainly the same as you learn to drive, or you learn to speak another language, or to play an instrument. It depends on repetition and reward. So of course, learning how to drive, it's exciting, and right, you want to be free and go everywhere. You have a motivation. Learning an instrument you need more skills, because you maybe need to learn how to read the music theory. So it's a set of skills that maybe are more complicated. So then you need more resources, more time, and more motivation, right? So it also depends on the task you want to learn. But I'm of the idea that anyone can learn anything if you set your mind to it.
Of course, I love that. And last couple of questions actually as well. Talk about activities. You mentioned, would you say that there's certain activities that you use to bring more than others? Say, for instance, sight reading or trying to listen to pitch, as opposed to say something else?
Well, this notion that the brain is doing something and then don't doing something, it is wrong. So the brain is, all the areas of the brain are active all the time, right? But there are fluctuations in this activity, okay? So if I close my eyes, the neurons in my occipital cortex are still working, right? But when I open them, they start to fire more in a more more visible way that you can actually measure in an MRI, right? So the brain is working all the time. For example, when we are doing mental navigation, theory of mind, which is doing nothing, just wondering about something, there are a set of areas called the default mode network that are more active, right? And when we start doing a task, then these areas diminish the activity. When we do a task about sensory motor, something manually, then the activity of these areas, for example, the motor cortex, will be more active. But if I'm not moving, it's still active. The area is still active. So in terms of practicing music, it depends on the cognitive, what we call the cognitive load. How hard is it, right? So for example, if you subtract 13 from 100 and then 13 again, it's much difficult than subtracting by 1, right? So that requires more engagement, right? And then it depends. When we are actually doing a task, then there's this other set of network instead of the default mode network. It's the executive network, which is the frontoparietal network. This is when we are doing something active, okay? Then we have the sensory motor network, the visual network, the auditory network, the salience network. So something pops out, grabs our attention, that's the saliency network.
Got it.
The language network. So we have different areas, right? So it depends on what you want to do, how hard is it, the number of areas that you are going to recruit.
Got it.
Yeah.
And we're getting to the end of the episode now. But what to find out actually as well is, have you done any research on the brains of multi-instrumentalists and how their brains are structured and how it works? Because that's something I'm fascinated of people that play more than one instrument, 2, 3, 4 instruments at a time. Yeah.
I mean, we have here I play several instruments. We have several of my colleagues, almost half maybe are multi-instrumentalists.
Wow.
And it seems that the difference is not that evident, because once you know music, you know the language, right?
Of course.
So, for example, learning piano is very good. You learn piano, you catch very easily the guitar and the bass, some other the drums, because with piano you learn syncopation and polyrhythms also in your fingers, so you can also learn drumming. But maybe learning how to play the violin will be much more difficult, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of overlap, but maybe there are some things that are extra in this multi-instrumentalist. We haven't checked that out, but that's very interesting.
Okay. And that is a brilliant way to end the episode. But Victor, I can't say thank you enough for today. Honestly, I learned so much from you. Thank you. So it's been talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And before I go, how can people find you online, just in case?
So we have a website called musicinthebrain.dk. You can find all the people that work here, all the researchers. We have more or less is a center of 30. We have new PhD students coming this year. And yes, and my Twitter handle is my 2 last names, Pando-Naude, and I'm more or less active in Twitter.
Lovely. But once again, Victor, thank you so much for today. Honestly, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And take care, everyone. Bye-bye.